Good morning and welcome to Rising. We've got quite a show for you today. So much interesting news to get to. So let's do that. Let's get right into it. What a difference a week makes. It was just last Monday that all eyes were focused on GOP presidential nominee Donald Trump and the failed attempt on his life. But that almost feels like ancient history now. In another virtually unprecedented development, President Joe Biden has announced to the world via social media that he is abandoning his plans to run for president. His letter announcing that reads in part, "I believe it is in the best interest of my party and the country for me to stand down and focus solely on fulfilling my duties as president for the remainder of my term." Now, the last time something remotely similar to this occurred was during the 1968 election when President Lyndon Johnson said he would not seek the party's nomination. But he was not a mere 170 days away from the election, as Joe Biden was when that happened. Now, while the political world is mostly expecting Biden to drop out, this announcement stirred even the most complacent out of a stupor and shocked the political world. Now, political and media figures who had schemed to replace Biden are now heaping praise on him for, in their words, doing the right thing and getting out of the way. Former President Barack Obama wrote that Joe understands better than anyone the stakes in this election, how everything he has fought for throughout his life, everything the Democratic Party stands for, will be at risk if we allow Donald Trump back in the White House. It's a testament to Biden's love of country. Now, former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who was in fact the mastermind behind this effort to get Biden to drop out, said his legacy of vision, values, and leadership make him one of the most consequential presidents in American history.
Now, behind the scenes, Democratic senators, congressmen, and other power brokers worked tirelessly over the past week to persuade Biden to exit the race. They are now falling in line to endorse Vice President Kamala Harris for the nomination. She already has the support of Biden, the Clintons, and other Democratic royalty. But there are currently more than 153 Democrats backing Kamala, and the number is sure to grow. Others, including former President Barack Obama and Nancy Pelosi, have not yet thrown their political weight firmly behind Kamala. Marianne Williamson seems to be the only Democrat who's mounting any sort of challenge to Kamala Harris. Rumors had circulated yesterday afternoon that Senator Joe Manchin was considering a run, but he put an end to that speculation this morning, saying, "I'm not running." Meanwhile, money is pouring into the Democratic campaign coffers. Sunday was the single biggest day for online Democratic donations in years. More than 50 million came in, according to the New York Times. Donations soared from 200,000 an hour before the president stepped aside to 11.5 million in a single hour. Excitement is in the air.
So here we are. Joe Biden has gotten out of the race, and it is now going to be Kamala Harris, I would expect. That's who Joe Biden has chosen. You know, obviously there's been a lot of discussion about an open convention, and what about Gavin Newsom? What about Gretchen Whitmer? What about some other people? No one is speaking up and saying, I'm going to make a go of this. They're all falling in line behind Kamala Harris. So it's overwhelmingly likely that that is going to be the Democratic presidential candidate. So here we are. I obviously did not think this was, even up until seconds before Joe Biden said he was getting out, I still didn't really believe it was going to happen because his desire to hold power and seek a second term were so strong, and it seemed that nothing was going to shake him. But he was, I think, ultimately forced out by a combination of elite pressure from senior Democratic figures like Nancy Pelosi, and it sounds like behind the scenes Barack Obama. And then also the media has been relentlessly critical of him for the last month, ever since the debate performance. We saw what effect the media can have on a Democrat when they're treating them as harshly as they've treated Donald Trump for the last 8 years. And then also the fact that the donor money was entirely going to dry up. There was even more devastating poll numbers coming out for Joe Biden, that the race was really slipping beyond his grasp. His potential to defeat Trump was evaporating. So he is gone, and we will have, he's not leaving the presidency. He's going to finish out his term, which Republicans are saying is, well, wait a minute, if he's cognitively unfit to run for re-election, how can he be the president right now? And I saw like Nancy Mace wants to introduce a motion calling on the cabinet to invoke the constitutional provision to remove him and all that kind of thing. So that there will be plenty of discussion of that on the right. But what do you make of all this?
Well, it doesn't feel good to be right. I wish he had dropped out much sooner than this point in the race, to be honest with you, but it's fascinating to see it play out the way I thought it would. Nancy Pelosi saying things like we could do it the easy way or the hard way. Crazy coming from Nancy Pelosi, but behind closed doors, it sounds like a lot of the reporting that Democratic loyalists to Biden were like, this is ridiculous vibes-based reporting. None of this is true. None of this is really happening. Turns out it all was. So DMs are open for apologies. But I think it's shocking to see. I went so far as, I don't know if you remember this commentary, but I was like, I think it's going to happen in this way. They're going to threaten to embarrass him. They're going to run ads that make him look really bad. And that's exactly what happened. On Friday, there was reporting that a new super PAC was created of Democratic donors on July 9th called Pass the Torch PAC. They had a $36,000 ad slotted on his favorite show, Morning Joe, calling on him to drop out. So they've now pulled it. They might use the money to make an ad for Kamala Harris instead. But very shocking that it played out exactly how I thought it would.
Yeah. Now they're flattering him. They're heaping all this praise. I can't tell you how many people I've seen, Democratic-aligned people, Democrats, media figures saying, what a patriot, what an America First move, he did the right thing for the country. Like, to believe that, you have to be a figure of the Democratic or liberal thinking that it is a good thing for Democrats to defeat Donald Trump, which obviously is a view that many people have, also many people don't have. But so if you're convinced that it's important for another Democrat to win, then I guess this was a patriotic move because it's so fundamental. But I don't know. I find the whole rhetoric a little off-putting. Like, okay, you are on one team. You want your team to win. You convince Joe Biden to do a likelihood of our team winning, maximizing move. Good for you. Now, it's at the same time, and we're going to talk about this a little later, so we won't spend too much time on it right now, but at the same time, democracy itself is at stake, but this feels very counter-democratic. Now, I know Joe Biden didn't have this reservoir of deep, fanatical support or loyalty the way Donald Trump does on the other side. But he did actually win the delegates. It was kind of a sham process because it wasn't a competitive process. Mm-hmm. But he was actually chosen by the voters to be the candidate. And now a combination of elite pressure, big money donors, and those people have said, no, actually the will of the people will be thwarted. He's not going to be the candidate. Now, I know it's not exactly like that because
it's not at all
people
like
had
that.
no. Well, it's a little bit like that. He won the contest. Under the provision for picking the candidate. He won. Was it a competitive process? No. Was the process good? No. But he did win the process. It's kind of like when people complain that, but we won the popular vote. That should be who's president. Well, no, sorry. Maybe it should be, but it's not the system.
Well, a federal judge ruled after the 2016 election that within the Democratic National Convention, delegates don't have to actually vote for who the people sent them there to vote for who the people voted for. That's also similar to the Electoral College. But a federal judge said, actually, no, this is party business. The DNC lawyers argued and the court affirmed that they could go in a back room and smoke cigars and decide who the candidate is. That's essentially the primary we had. They said Joe Biden's the nominee. Florida didn't even hold a primary. He was uncontested in a lot of states. So this was not a meaningful or real election. And Republicans are saying it's against the law. A federal court already ruled that actually, no, it's party business, and it's
not against the law, but now
election laws don't apply.
Right. It's not against the law, clearly, and it's not baked into our founding documents.
It's not the will of the
that
people.
has to be done this way.
And it's not the elites on the other side.
No, this is a smoke-filled room saying, we've read the polling. We have concerns about Joe Biden, even though, again, he won all the delegates. So now we're putting someone else in. You're out. You're in. It's the smoke-filled room. You can be fine with the smoke-filled. Well, they pressured him to do it. You can be fine. You can have no problems with the smoke-filled room, but it is a smoke-filled room.
The national polling shows that it's the popular decision among Democrats that they want him to step down. So how can you say that this is just the elites deciding this in a smoke-filled room?
Well, they have buyer's remorse. They already picked him. They voted for him. We don't just say, oh, now there's a poll.
They did not. In some states, it was only 6,000 people who even cast a ballot in the primary because they didn't have a real
primary. Yeah, they should have
primary.
had an actual competitive primary, and then we would have maybe found out that the people didn't want Joe Biden to be the nominee.
Joe Biden should have dropped out then and given the people a real choice. Joe Biden being the candidate is the least democratic thing that could have happened. This, at least, we have some kind of a choice. Nancy Pelosi.
This seems even more even more undemocratic to me is behind the scenes a combination of elite media pressure and very, very wealthy donors say, we'd rather have Kamala Harris. I mean, where's the mandate for Kamala Harris? Who picked her? Who voted for her? She did terribly when she ran for president.
Millions of people voted for her in 2020 to be the vice president. She was on the ticket.
She was on the ticket, but when she was on her, they voted for her to be vice president, not president. When she ran for president herself, she did not do well. She did not cater to any natural constituency. She's never won an election outside of California on her own name, right, on her own top of the ticket thing.
I think what we're going to see happen is a lot of people turn out and vote for Kamala Harris. A lot of people have organized already, and
we've seen
the polling show that the majority of Democrats wanted this to happen. They didn't have a real say in who the candidate was this time around. But to say that it's the elites making the decision, Nancy Pelosi is probably, not the most
the avatar
elite person.
Of the elites.
I mean, yeah, but Nancy Pelosi pushing him out is very different from the CEOs that were speaking every day, the Democratic strategists that were speaking every day saying Joe Biden needs to stay in. There were equal elites on either side.
Oh, I don't agree with that. But we're going to discuss this more coming up next. Fun-filled show today. We've got lots to process from all sides. We're going to take a deeper dive into Kamala Harris and who she might select as her VP. We're going to see how the Republicans are responding. We're going to see how RFK Jr. is responding. Lots to get into. More Rising right after this. Well, we have some breaking news. President Donald Trump, former president, maybe future president, has made his vice presidential pick. That is Senator JD Vance from Ohio. JD Vance will be joining the ticket. That is not going to come as a surprise to our viewers. Obviously, Vance's name has been in the top 3 or 4 contenders for a long while. He was the favorite now for some time, but it has been made official. Donald Trump is picking JD Vance. So who is JD Vance? He is a figure, I would say, very much of the populist right. Author of Hillbilly Elegy, which was a book about his time growing up in Appalachia in a working class family and kind of the effects that the economic policies like outsourcing and closing of factories had on his friends and family growing up, kind of a poverty trap sort of thing. So he talks a lot about working class issues. He obviously subsequently went on to get a law degree and become a venture capitalist affiliated and associated with Peter Thiel, someone Donald Trump has been trying to court. Thiel was a major financial supporter of Trump in 2016, but declined to aid in the re-election effort in 2020. So I wonder if that's going to be making an overture. This move is an attempt to make an overture there. But what do you make of the pick, Jessica?
I think JD Vance is a bit of a fraud. This is a guy who went to Yale Law School and then worked as a lawyer for an LLP for a couple of years, and then ended up going to San Francisco to work in the tech industry. He was a venture capitalist. He raised $93 million for a venture capital firm. But the same guy, JD Vance, decided, oh, no, I'm all about solving the opioid crisis, actually. He started a nonprofit, raised $220,000. So I guess he made different phone calls, and it produced 2 op-eds, 2 tweets, and then shuttered. There was no more to be heard of it. It failed. He also has been known to have hired a consultant through that nonprofit in 2018 that ran a poll to assess his election bid for the Senate in 2022. He hired his campaign manager out of that nonprofit. This is a guy who's lied about what the money's going to. He said it's for the opioid crisis. It ended up funding his political campaign. He's only been in the Senate since 2022. And as you mentioned, Peter Thiel was a big backer of that, $15 million worth. So he's selling this message that, oh, I'm a hero of the working class because I'm from the working class, when he's sold out the working class. He stands for big tech, the number one job of his donor in his 2022 Senate bid. The job title was CEO, not teacher, not Lowe's employee, CEO. So that's a little bit of who JD Vance is. The one thing he brings to the table is he's very loyal to Donald Trump.
Yes, he is. And so when he started out kind of becoming noticed on the political scene, the news scene, obviously that was coming off the book he wrote, Hillbilly Elegy. I read it. I thought it was a very good book, to be perfectly honest. Now, in it, he's sort of describing the plight of working class people, of people who dealing with the economic changes in the country that impacted him and his family, how addiction impacted him and his family. It really is a remarkable story of hard work and overcoming a difficult situation. It's a very moving book, and in it, he explains why why the people in his community are suffering these things without saying that. Without just saying it's the fault of broader forces, and he's also talking about how people need to embrace family and hard work and socially conservative values. And then when Trump appeared on the scene, JD Vance initially disparaged him completely as a fraud and a fake. Actually, JD Vance likened Trump to Hitler numerous times, which is pretty interesting to think about. And now he's saying that anyone who makes that comparison has participated in inviting violence against Donald Trump. Describing the recent assassination attempt as motivated by some of that rhetoric. So he moved from someone who understands why Trump supporters feel the way they do, but is nevertheless very against Trump, to totally, fully committed to Trump. I'm honestly a little surprised by the pick, just that I think JD Vance is a very savvy, articulate explainer of the kind of Trump philosophy and worldview, and is someone who seeks the spotlight himself. Unlike Mike Pence, who is kind of a background player, I can see JD Vance being very vocal on behalf of the administration. He's very active on social media. He does a lot of interviews. In the theory that the president, the nominee, the presidential nominee, doesn't want to share the spotlight or bring someone along who is themselves very attention-seeking. This is kind of actually counter to that. So I'm interested to see that Trump has done it, because this is a figure who obviously no one can possibly outshine Donald Trump himself in terms of media attention. But this is someone who is very much accustomed to the spotlight and does well in a media environment when he's in it.
Yeah, this is someone who hasn't even served 2 years in the Senate. So I think Donald Trump probably likes that this is not a seasoned politician. This is not someone that's going to question Donald Trump's power. They have a lot in common. I mean, Vance starting his nonprofit that was only in operation for under 5 years. It closed its doors in 2021. I don't think it ever had doors or an office that were open, given all we got out of it was 2 op-eds and 2 tweets. And of course, the polling for JD Vance's 2022 bid. This is someone who is willing to use those dollars, even if he writes eloquently in a book about the struggle and plight of the working class and how addiction has been, how many working class families have coped with the economic struggles that they deal with on a day-to-day basis. He might understand that and write about it very well. But at the end of the day, he sold those people out. The money that he fundraised to address the opioid crisis in Ohio, he used for his own personal gain, for his own personal power. And in that sense, I think he has a lot in common with Donald Trump. This is someone who's willing to sell America a populist message. But at the end of the day, we see that all the people who benefit are people who are elites, people who are CEOs, people who are the very wealthy, like Peter Thiel. That's who they serve. So I think they have a lot in common, and this pick makes a lot of sense. What I'm curious to see now is who will serve in the Senate in Ohio. I've heard people float Vivek Ramaswamy as potentially getting that appointment. That would be very interesting to see, Robbie.
That will be interesting to see. I will be interested to see a vice presidential debate between JD Vance and Kamala Harris. She's certainly going to have her work cut out for her there. As I said, he is a very good debater, good arguer, a very smart, brilliant individual. I hear you criticizing him as insincerely, populist on the issues that are important to you. I'm almost going the other. I think he's too populist. He's moving, or not too populist, to left, frankly, on kind of economic issues, which is not something I generally tend to agree with. For instance, he's called Lena Khan, who's a very progressive Biden official leading the FTC, obviously filing all these bringing all these actions against Amazon and Facebook and all sorts of other big companies. He said that he thinks she's doing a great job. So he could be someone who brings more of an antitrust attitude to governing. If Donald Trump is to get another term, which looks very likely. He's talked obviously about breaking up the tech companies, which is interesting given that he comes from sort of the related world of venture capitalism, working with Peter Thiel, an early investor in Facebook, all that sort of thing. I think it's an interesting development on the right. These figures who are they kind of crusading anti-tech people, but are actually also in good standing with other very wealthy interests in tech. So he kind of fits in there.
I think I would place him as someone who's critical of maybe the oligopoly or monopolies we've seen. I mean, Peter Thiel's PayPal isn't even in the top 50 biggest tech firms in the country. So he could be someone that's maybe against oligopolies or monopolies, which the FTC has really paid attention to and taken some action to break up. But I don't think this is someone who stands against big companies or the elites in the country, given his massive support of CEOs and people like Peter Thiel. I think what we're going to see happen is exactly what we saw on the trail in 2022, where he ran on addressing the opioid crisis, saying he was a champion of that. It came out that he wasn't. And then he was not someone who was willing to criticize big pharmaceutical companies. And so when you have donors who are CEOs and members of big tech and big pharma, you make deals, you make promises. They might say, well, I donated to his campaign because, he reflects what I'd like to see happen in my industry. And so I support his candidacy, when really what happens in those back rooms are agreements and deals. And I think because of the support we've seen in 2022 for JD Vance, I don't think we're going to see that change. I think we're going to see the same thing we saw happen under Donald Trump, where he cut taxes for corporations and created a deadline and cut taxes by a much lower margin for working and middle class people. So I think the pick makes sense because it's right in line with how Trump not ran in 2016, but how he governed 2016 to 2020.
Well, Joe Biden has responded to the pick, writing on X, here's the deal about JD Vance. He talks a big game about working people, but now he and Trump want to raise taxes on middle-class families while pushing more tax cuts for the rich. Obviously, the announcement itself came on Truth Social. I think that was the first time a vice presidential pick has been announced on Truth Social. Truth Social might not have even been around in the prior cycle or before that, I can't recall. So that's the announcement there from Donald Trump up on the screen. He references Hillbilly Elegy and Vance's history, some of the things I pointed out, support of American workers and farmers in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio. Obviously, these are all states that are important for Trump to win. So you can see the pick as maybe one geared at bringing as something that's going to help him in Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, which, like I said on the show today, are going to be the states that end up deciding this election. So I think that's maybe the strategy there is doubling down on penetration into those the Rust Belt, Midwest, white working class states, making that pitch to voters who helped Trump beat Hillary Clinton in 2016, but then did not show up in 2020, where Joe Biden won those states and the presidency. It's all going to come down to those three states yet again. We will have more to say about JD Vance, I'm sure, on the show tomorrow. Thanks for tuning in. Good morning and welcome to Rising. We've got an excellent show for you today, which includes some breaking news that we're going to get to right off the bat. This just in, Kamala Harris has apparently picked Minnesota Governor Tim Walz to be her vice president. He was seen as a dark horse candidate just some weeks ago. This small-town Midwesterner skyrocketed to the forefront, beating Governor Josh Shapiro, Andy Beshear, and others to become Harris's number two. Some close to her saying it was ultimately a vibe thing. Now, in the last few weeks, Walz has hit the ground running for auditioning for the role for Harris's Veep. Let's watch some of that.
How are you going to build a water treatment plant in a town of 400 if you don't have a collective effort at it? So I have to tell you, they scream socialism. We just build roads and we build schools and we build prosperity into this. Their whole plan is to go backwards, to give tax cuts to the wealthy. And look, it was so surprising. You know, these super successful Donald Trump, who inherited $400 million and then proceeded to fail at everything. Middle America, you earn it, but you know what? You're not on your own. Neighbors help neighbors. And I will, this one bothers me. I heard you talking about punching back at the bullies. They see people less fortunate as scapegoats and you know, punchlines for their jokes. We see them as neighbors. And I said it with my mom. My dad dies when my little brother's young. We're teenagers. We get Social Security survivor benefits. I'm all for pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. We didn't have any boots. Social Security was the boots, and we pulled ourselves up, and we paid that back. And I think JD Vance gets none of that. You know, it's the aw shucks, I'm from here or whatever. So my hillbilly cousins did not go to Yale, but I'll tell you what they did. They contributed to our community, and they're proud of it.
Walz continued, taking swipes at potential rival Trump's VP pick, JD Vance. Let's take a look at that.
That's what JD Vance's stick is, talking about guns. I guarantee you he can't shoot pheasants like I can. And that's a part of saying, but you know what? I guarantee I don't want weapons of war in classrooms, and there's no reason that you can't have reasonable restrictions around that without infringing on your Second Amendment. He's going in there throwing these things around that makes a difference. Democrats need to go into these places. I'm going to go in every Legion Hall I can go into and say, Vice President Harris will not cut your benefits. I sat in the VA committee for 12 years to increase those benefits with Republicans like Jeff Miller from Florida. This guy wants to cut them because it's in the 2025. We need to be bolder on that. We need to go out and say that.
And of course, Walz is known for propelling Democrats' leading insult against the GOP. It's weird.
These are weird people on the other side. They want to take books away. They want to be in your exam room. That's what it comes down to. And don't, you know, get sugarcoating this. These are weird ideas. Listen to them speak. Listen how they talk about things. Listen to how your previous guests were right. Like you said, they've told them that they shouldn't talk about race. They can't help it. It is built into their DNA because there is no plan. There's no health care plan. There's no health care plan. There's nothing to do on this. They want to take away our alliances and leave Russia to do whatever they want. Look, they are bad on foreign policy. They are bad on the environment. They certainly have no health care plan. And they keep talking about the middle class that, as I said, a robber baron real estate guy and a venture capitalist trying to tell us they understand who we are. They don't know who we are.
And if vibes are what Harris wants, Walz is giving. Here he is with his daughter Hope at a fair in Minnesota. Watch.
Every year we as a family do something old and something new. I get to pick something, a classic, the old mill ride, to do that. And then Hope gets to pick something new.
I think we're gonna go do the slingshot.
Which I don't know what it is, and they're keeping it from me. But then we're gonna go get some food. Corn dog?
I'm vegetarian.
Turkey then. And
Turkey's meat.
Not in Minnesota, turkey special. And we will go do some of those things and report back.
Oh my God! Oh my God!
So I like Walz. I'm very happy, Ravi. This is a very good morning, and a lot of people posted the vibes. Yes, thanks, Ravi. I think the vibes are there, but I also think he's someone who's good on policy and good at talking about the issues. I'm just very happy all around with this pick. As I come to all of our viewers from the Midwest, from Iowa, Walz represents a kind of culture that I think has died away, sadly, in a lot of other parts of America. There's community here. He talks about neighbors. And I remember when I was a kid, neighbors did take care of neighbors, but that quickly went away, maybe just before the recession. But I grew up on the East Coast in the tri-state area, and we didn't have the culture that's still alive and well in the Midwest. And I think even if you're not Midwestern, I think people want that for America. So as much as he has good vibes, because he's a state champion football coach, he was a teacher. When he was elected to Congress, he quickly became the president of the freshman class. He's a guy that people like, but he also has a track record of delivering on policy as governor. And I think that made him a really good pick.
Well, we're all three of us Midwesterners. Obviously, I grew up in Michigan, and so I can identify with the vibe, even as I have some quibbles with his choice. I mean, I understand from your perspective, yes, I agree. He's an excellent choice. He is clearly a more progressive leaning person on every issue. I think he's probably arguably more committedly progressive than Kamala Harris is. So I'm sure the left is happy with this choice. I think politically speaking, it doesn't make the most sense to me, doesn't make as much sense to me as picking Josh Shapiro, being that Josh Shapiro is the governor of the must-win state for Kamala, and he's very popular there. With moderates and Republicans and everyone else. If he improved even slightly her chances of winning that state. I know you think that Tim Walz will be well received by the people in Pennsylvania as well, and that very well might be the case, but it's just that it's their governor and it's the must-win state. But, I think in some ways this might be actually Kamala doing something a little bit similar to Hillary in 2016, and we know how that turned out, is picking, a folksy guy, a likable guy, but not a guy who's gonna, who brings so much star power himself that he's going to overshadow her. Hillary Clinton picked Tim Kaine, senator from Virginia, a name is not really one we commonly hear from. Again, not someone who was gonna clash with her in any way, was not a massive plus or a minus, was just a guy on the ticket with her, was not going to overshine her. Tim Walz I also seems folksy, relatable, speaks well on TV, will perform well in a debate, will do well on a campaign trail. I'm not at all knocking his performance as a political figure or a talking head. I think he's got that down. I think he'll rep the ticket well. So I think it's hardly a bad choice from that direction. However, it does, I think, will suggest maybe to a lot of the Republican, never Trump, moderate, centrist people who are maybe looking at the Harris ticket and saying, could I get on board? Is this the guy that brings them on board? This guy who's even more to the left on energy and environmental issues and a lot of economic issues than she is. Is that really going to be the right sell? I don't know.
I think it will be, because I think a lot of Kamala's positions there seem like coastal elitism to me. It seems like more establishment Democrat politics to satisfy the corporate donors of the party. Tim Walz has never been that guy. And Rahm Emanuel and the Democratic establishment really didn't like him when he was running for his House seat. But the way he talks about delivering on policy for the working class is not in terms of being far left or being progressive. As he puts it, they scream socialism. We just build roads and we build schools. And that's something that's actually proven to win in a very Republican district when he first ran in 2002 and 2004 in Minnesota. So that's a district that Trump won in 2020, 53.8% to 43.7%. That's also a district that Walz won 49.5% for him and 47.17% against him. So he's proven to win. When he first ran in Minnesota 1, this was a district that was favored for Republicans in prior elections by 7 points. And then he won in this district that's 60% Republican, 35% Democrats in terms of voter registration, according to the Minnesota Secretary of State website. So he's putting up good numbers. He had to get Republicans to vote for him to win that vote share. So I think that is really huge, that he's someone who's proven to win in a very conservative district and win with a margin that required getting conservatives to turn out. In that sense, I think he's safer than Shapiro, who's only served one term as governor and hasn't really proven to win in handedly Republican districts. So I think
Shapiro won in the whole state, right? I mean, he won, instead of winning one district that his, demographics and political makeup has changed dramatically in 20 years, Shapiro won the entire state, and it's the state. Kamala doesn't need to just win Walz's district. She's going to win the state of Minnesota, probably, in all likelihood, but she needs to win the state of Pennsylvania. So I think that's the comparison, is to the whole state.
Yeah, and I think Walz is someone who can win in Pennsylvania, given that he's popular enough to become the president of his freshman class. He's also got a military background. When he retired from the National Guard after 24 years of service. And when he retired, he was at the rank of
command sergeant major. So he's the highest ranking enlisted man to ever serve in the US Congress. This is a guy who can really make the case to a lot of working Americans who like the vibe of someone who's a state football champion and a teacher, but also someone who talks about political issues as if they're common sense. Yeah. And I think that is someone who can campaign in Pennsylvania and win people over. But I'm not confident Josh Shapiro would have been able to campaign in the Midwest and win people over in the way that Tim Walz has proven to. And so whatever it came down to, whether it's that Shapiro served in the IDF, that progressives like Walz and young people like Walz, and you need those people for manpower to win an election, whether it's on social media or walking the streets and knocking doors, that's a really important group to have behind you. Whatever it was, I think the country's better for this decision because Shapiro's been governor for a year. We don't really know what he's capable of. He's gotten some good things done in the short span that he's been governor, but I think Tim Walz proving to provide free lunch for kids at schools, proven to invest in infrastructure, and proven to win handedly and have a trifecta in Minnesota in a way that hasn't pissed off Republicans in his state. And a lot of Republicans are happy with the programs he's put forward. I think that's someone that can win in Pennsylvania and a lot of other states like Georgia and maybe even North Carolina.
Well, we're going to continue talking about this. A lot more to get into. Going to get some reactions from political folks about the pick. Stay tuned. More Rising in just a minute. Hello, welcome to Rising. I'm Robbie Suave, joined by Jessica Burbank to react to the first half of the Trump-Harris debate, which is taking place. There's already plenty of stuff to get into. And Jessica, I don't know about you. For me, the headline so far has been the moderators, which I'm going to have a lot of critical things to say about this time around. They've been very active fact-checking or attempting to fact-check Donald Trump, which I can see on social media is irritating a whole lot of people on the right, feeling that it is not equal whatsoever, that it's just focused on Donald Trump. In fact, there's been times where Kamala Harris has almost disappeared from the debate because it's just Trump being combative with the moderators. That's not what happened in the CNN debate with Joe Biden, where they basically just asked them both questions and you didn't have that kind of thing. Here it's aggressive. That's what's going to be talked about on the right tomorrow. What's your reaction so far?
Yeah, I think if they want moderators that are not going to have to interject and correct the record on what's true, they should just find a candidate who doesn't lie constantly. He said he actually won the election in 2020 and the evidence is there. He said Walz is for the post-birth execution of babies. He talked about post-term abortions after 9 months and after birth happening. That doesn't happen in the United States. They had to correct the record on that. He's saying people don't go to Kamala Harris's rallies and she's bussing them in from other states because no one would want to go otherwise. He talked about dogs being eaten in Springfield. That's a story we debunked earlier on the show today.
Well, and he got that wrong, actually, because the allegation was not that they were eating dogs, but that they were eating cats, which prompted all of the cat memes on social media. Of course, the actual truth is that there is not an allegation of a cat being eaten by a Haitian immigrant. What the residents of the town were complaining about is wildlife, ducks being killed by the immigrants, and there are reports of people saying that, not eating people's pets. So he didn't pay attention to the meme enough.
Yeah, I guess not. He talked about the FBI reporting that crime is down, that's actually wrong and not factual. He talked about the fact that he believes the president and vice president can sign bills into law without Congress. So he said a lot of things that are just plainly not true. He's defected to answering with the same old playbook on tariffs. He says China will pay for them rather than the American people. Same playbook saying Mexico's going to pay for the wall. And so we're seeing him running 2016 over again when it didn't work when he ran it over again in 2020.
Yeah, but what I want to know is why, and that's all fine, and that's Kamala's job to call that out and to correct him if he's exaggerating or saying things wrong. The moderators are helping her tremendously. She was not really pushed on. I mean, I am very against tariffs. I think Trump's tariffs are a bad policy. I think Biden's continuation of the tariffs was a bad policy. And she kind of got asked about that, and she didn't answer that at all. Well, you're criticizing his economic plan, but isn't there tremendous amounts of continuity on that? I did want to bring up something she alluded to very early on that a lot of people described as acknowledgement of the lab leak theory. So here's the exact quote of what she said. She said, talking about COVID in China. What Donald Trump did, let's talk about this with COVID, is he actually thanked President Xi for what he did during COVID. Look at his tweet. Thank you, President Xi, ! When we know that Xi was responsible for not giving us transparency about the origins of COVID. Now, that could, I guess, just be transparency about wet market or that kind of thing. But I saw RFK Jr., for instance, on Twitter interpreting that as an ode to the lab leak, which showing, if that's what she meant, we've come a long way in this discourse that now the Democratic presidential candidate is also talking about it.
Right. I will say the moderators are journalists. They have a duty to their viewers to ensure that the truth is said on the channel. What stood out to me the most is the conversation around abortion. You had Kamala Harris talking about in detail what women are going through thanks to the abortion bans that went into effect after Roe v. Wade was overturned, thanks to the Trump-appointed Supreme Court justices. She did a very good job detailing that there are women who are struggling with miscarriages, who have to bleed out in waiting rooms because doctors are afraid to operate because they don't know if the procedure that's required will be considered an unlawful abortion. When asked if he would be someone who wouldn't sign a federal ban, he was actually asked about JD Vance, who said he would sign it, even though Trump is saying, he wouldn't sign something like that. Nothing like that would ever come before his desk. He says he never talked to his own vice presidential pick about that. So if Donald Trump, for whatever reason, isn't able to serve in office, we will have someone in office who will sign a ban. He had no answer for Kamala Harris talking about people leaving his rallies early and him having no vision for America spoken to at these rallies, that is just all about himself and fictional characters. That, I think, really got under his skin. She said they leave early from exhaustion and boredom, and he didn't like that. He also wasn't able to answer on how he killed the bipartisan border bill. He was directly asked about why he decided to torpedo that piece of legislation when Kamala Harris accurately pointed out that he chose to run on the issue of immigration instead of do something about it.
Yeah, he didn't address that at all. She didn't address when she was asked about it, her flip-flopping on a variety of issues. She said she was going to, but then she didn't really. And look, I don't agree that it's the moderator's job to, I don't think they should be engaged in nearly as much fact-checking as they're doing, because it's coming out totally biased that Donald Trump has to debate 3 people at once, and the moderators have tremendous power to, as soon as he stops speaking, they go, and we just have to correct because that wasn't true, and they say that. They're not doing that to Kamala Harris. I think the hands-off approach that, for instance, Jake Tapper and Dana Bash took during the first debate was far superior to what we're witnessing here, and there's going to be, but it's having an effect. I agree that it's working to hurt Trump. He has been somewhat rattled so far. Kamala has lured him into a couple areas of discussion that are not particularly productive for Trump, talking about, yes, for instance, the rallies and that kind of thing, having him talk about his business record and that kind of stuff. We're way past that. He needs to be hitting how the policies of the Biden administration have failed the country on the economy, on immigration, how Harris is a part of those policies. Turn it back on that at every time. And he's allowed her to draw him into some less favorable territory. They spent a whole lot of time on abortion. Again, the moderators are really doing Kamala a lot of favors, I have to say, and it's showing. And the betting markets right now are not too high on Trump's chances to win this debate.
Yeah, I think a big reason for that is we really haven't heard a solid answer on what his vision is policy-wise for the country. He's busy lying about things that have happened in the past instead of speaking about what his policy plan is, what he will do to address the issues he's asked about. And so what we have is, yes, he's lying a lot. Kamala Harris isn't getting fact-checked by the moderators because she doesn't have a loose interpretation of the truth. She's not up there lying like he is. But he definitely, I would agree, is taking the bait. It's like when you're fishing, there's sunnies, which are something that will just bite at anything that flashes. That is Donald Trump tonight, absolutely. Yeah. Do you think probably Kamala Harris got under his skin a little bit with some of these questions?
What's that? I do think she's gotten under her skin, yes. Yeah, I think
that but part of that is he's willing to take the bait. For whatever she throws out, he's responding to absolutely everything that she says every little comment instead of, talking about his policies. And I think that makes this debate so far, at least for me, definitely a loss for Donald Trump.
I mean, she's absolutely repeated, she accused him of calling the neo-Nazis very fine people, something that Snopes has debunked, for instance, that's not what he said. Moderators didn't jump on her to correct her there. They haven't jumped on her about anything. In fact, they didn't, when she said she was going to explain why she changed her mind about fracking and then didn't, they didn't care. So it's got to either be, in fact, I don't really want them to do that. I think it's the candidate's job to cross-examine each other in the way that Trump did so skillfully of Biden in the first debate, and Biden was incapable of doing because he's no longer cognitively fit to be in this kind of
what was the lie in the answer
contest.
about fracking? What did she lie about in that response?
She did not. She said she would explain all of these alleged flip-flops, and then she said she's not for banning fracking, but she was for it in the past. So she was asked to explain whether she counts this as a flip-flop or change of her opinion, and she said she would do all of that, and then she didn't. She just said she doesn't have that opinion anymore.
Yeah, she said she believes in a transition to renewable energy, and her values on that haven't changed. That was her approach to get to a place of renewable energy when she ran the first time around and was on her website in 2019. And she said now, she's in Pennsylvania, she's vice president, she hasn't banned fracking, but she still believes in a transition. So her values are the same, that we need to get to a more sustainable place when it comes to where we're getting our energy from. Her values are the same, but her policy approach has changed. So I think she sufficiently answered that. It is true that she hasn't banned fracking as president. In fact, she explained this under the Inflation Reduction Act and a lot of the post-COVID policy and economic stimulus bills. They actually approved new permits for fracking under the Kamala Harris administration. She was the tie-breaking vote for that piece of legislation. So it is true that it was on her policy plan, but I think she sufficiently answered that question and definitely did so without lying. What I'm looking for from Trump is just, I'm keeping a tally of how many things he lies about because it's getting a little bit entertaining. I would like some description of what his policy plan is. This is leaving a void for Project 2025 to, I think, fill the blank because he's not painting a vision or even talking about Agenda 47 tonight.
Well, we will be back with more analysis of the rest of the debate coming up soon.
If you think you are seeing green, you are, because it's Brat summer, and the green color of the Charli XCX album, Brat, is overtaking the internet for those of you who don't already know. Memes are exploding all over TikTok, Instagram, and X, and young voters are rallying behind who many of them are calling the brat, Kamala Harris. Now, the term brat was coined by the artist Charli XCX in her summer album Brat, which encourages female empowerment, confidence, and trying to enjoy life as much as possible despite the struggles one might be facing or living in a troubled social and political climate. And on Sunday, after Joe Biden dropped out of the 2024 presidential race, Charli XCX herself tweeted, "Kamala is brat," so we have confirmation. And now this led to a firestorm of Kamala Harris brat videos and coconut tree memes just taking over social media, inspired by the speech Harris gave, saying, quote, "You think you just fell out of a coconut tree? You exist in the context of all in which you live and what came before you."
See what can be, what should be, unburdened by what has been.
It's me, you're all in danger. Never getting back because I'm such a hater. Got my finger on the detonator. Crazy girl shit, gonna go spring breakers. Every time I make it so outrageous. Always gonna listen to people playing safer. 4, 3, 2, 1, see you later. Crazy girl shit, gonna go spring breakers. Gonna go spring breakers.
Harris HQ has even incorporated the brat meme into their own campaign strategy to get Kamala elected in November.
They're posting, and probably going to be posting, the content that Kamala could never post on her own, but labeling them as this separate entity of her, so it's not coming directly from her brand and her as a person, is genius. She knows exactly what she's doing.
Now, even t-shirts are being made. Brat's Kamala shirt is already on Fire Island. The gays move so fast, one posted.
X users are also sharing a photo of the character Coconut Head from the popular 2000s Nickelodeon show Ned's Declassified School Survival Guide, which I've not seen, although I have seen some memes from it that I really do like. Others have photoshopped Kamala's face onto pop artist Chappelle Roan. Is that how I say that, Jess?
Chapel.
Okay. And are calling her, I can't even read that. Kamala-nomenon. Wow. Planned words from the pop artist song
Phenomenon.
Thank you. But some on the right are not taking well to this social media zeitgeist, saying this country doesn't need a brat, it needs a parent.
We don't need a brat in this moment, we need a parent. Okay, the border's open, inflation's through the roof, the price of gas has doubled. Brats did this, a brat attitude of like, I'll get to it when I get to it, we're just here living our truth. Okay, there's only the truth, as you know, and the truth is the country's a mess.
Wait, hold on.
This is the thing, it's supposed to be a sell that she's considered sort of incompetent.
Boring, old, negative 1,000 aura points, don't like it.
No, that's my dear friend Jimmy Failure, and I agree with him. Look, we had this discussion of what brat is and what it means yesterday. I also got some schooling in this from some of my younger colleagues at Reason Magazine. And there's been, so this has hit the whole understanding of brat and the cultural moment has now, like the wave has crashed or crested or whatever, so that we all have to discuss this for the next week or whatever. The Free Press, Barry Weiss's Free Press, had an article about this from my friend Kat Rosenfeld, who is a really good processor of pop culture trends and what they mean for politics. So I'm just going to read what she wrote about it. She says, the best summary of bratdom might come from my Free Press colleague River Page, who quips, "Brat girl summer is just women acting like gay guys." Charlie XCX describes the quintessential brat as just that girl who's a little messy and maybe says dumb things sometimes, who feels herself, but then also maybe has a breakdown and parties through it. It's honest, blunt, and volatile. Why would you want to associate a presidential candidate with a steady diet of self-regard and cocaine in slime-colored clothing?
Well, those people don't understand culture. That's not what Brat Summer is. This is the right and right-leaning people coping with the girls, gays, and theys winning the culture war, quite frankly. You have Fox News giving commentary on Brat Summer, using brat language to make political points. We've already won. They look ridiculous and silly. This is the youth vote decidedly saying, we are on the left. And that's what this is. And they're going to cope with this however they may. And it's very fun to watch everyone misunderstand what brat is about and try and make sense of it.
I don't think I'm misunderstanding what it is. I'm just questioning. It seems forced.
Well, that is not what it is.
It seems forced to me to apply it to Kamala Harris.
Women acting like gay guys, that is not descriptive of the brat movement whatsoever. The girls, gays, and theys have always been
that's what you said.
A cultural group. It's not girls acting like gays.
Well, everybody has their own culture. The people you're talking about are often defining culture at the most elite levels, yes.
It's not the most elite levels. Brat Summer it has nothing to do with being elite. The album is able to stream for free.
Okay, what does it have to do with being left?
Do we think Jeff Bezos is jamming out to Charlie XCX? No, Robbie.
It might be, I don't know.
White straight men run the country. Those are the elites.
Boy.
The girls, gays, and theys are the elites. That's what you're going with?
Straight men run the country.
Oh, this is such a fun moment and a fun cope. So the brat movement, you'll see these green haze over the videos, and you'll see videos like the ones we showed of Kamala Harris. It's called a fan cam usually, and so it's got the Brat Summer music. We've also had Phenomenon, which is a music theme about women having power. It comes from a Chappell Roan song. That's why Kamala-nomenon is a thing. And it's about women empowerment and how we need a movement of women because we've lived in a society mostly run by men for a very long time, and look how it's going, not so well. So that's what it's about, really.
But what this sounds to me like is Hillary Clinton girl boss feminism once again.
No, because...
But how is it different?
Because Hillary Clinton herself is very cringe. Kamala's a woman of culture.
Kamala's not cringe?
She is fun aunt energy. Hillary Clinton has annoying neighbor lady who calls the police. It's more Karen energy. It's very, very different. And Hillary Clinton saying Pokemon go to the polls That wasn't even a thing before she said it. And this is also people...
Management wants to... HR wants you to find the difference between these two photos. They're the same photo.
It's organic. Hillary Clinton trying to cater to the youth is very different than the youth embracing Kamala Harris, because it's about more than just brat and just Chappell Roan. It's about they actually support her candidacy and her policies. There are people making videos with millions of views about stuff she did as Attorney General.
What are her views? What does she stand? I don't know what she stands for.
She's proposed lowering taxes for the middle and working class, raising pay for teachers. She supports a public option for healthcare, at least she did in 2020 when she was the Attorney General. And they were pushing for the overturning of Proposition 8. She was the first person to call and say, start the marriages now. When someone who was transgender, who was put in prison in California, she went and visited them in prison and made sure they had the care they need personally. This is a woman who cares about people, and Gen Z has seen that. While she's been painted as someone who's a figure of the establishment, she has the hope of embracing a progressive agenda.
I would be very hesitant about casting her as some beloved Gen Z cultural icon in day 3 of her candidacy. I'm sure she does have fans among the cultural thought leaders, the group of people you're describing, that they're behind her is going to be no surprise, because they're going to be behind the Democratic leader, period. But whether she has a broader... Is her, if her numbers are better than Biden's among young people, we'll see. Well, her numbers overall.
No,
specifically
among young people, yeah.
Okay, we'll see. More Rising right after this. Good evening, and thanks for watching Rising. You are tuning into our special coverage of the vice presidential debate. We have just seen the first half of it, and I thought so far it's been a very substantive debate, very policy-focused. They started right off the bat getting into foreign policy with the news coming out of the Middle East today, war between Israel and Iran, Iran striking Israel, and both candidates asked how they would handle that situation if they were in power. Would we support Israel striking Iran? I think Tim Walz got off to a little bit of a rough start, but he's recovered somewhat since then. JD Vance, whatever you think of him, and I've made no secrets of the fact that he was not my preferred vice presidential candidate for the Republicans, is rhetorically very gifted, and I think has performed exceptionally well so far. I think Donald Trump has to be impressed with the job he's done and has to be happy about his selection. Tim Walz has done better as it's gone on and as the subject has gone more in his favor for what's being talked about. We just heard a lot on abortion. I'm going to critique the hell out of the moderators in a minute, but what is your takeaway so far?
I think you're right. I mean, compared to the last debate, which was spicy, and it couldn't be more obvious the differences between the two, I think these two were chosen for a reason. They were both chosen because they knew that the white working class voters in the Midwest and the Rust Belt were important. And both of these two have the brand of speaking to those voters. Now, do I believe they both represent them? No, of course not. But they both have that brand in one way or another. And it is absolutely true that they're both vying for that vote, but they're also measured. They need to measure the temperaments of the ticket above them. I mean, Kamala Harris is very measured, but Donald Trump is not. And JD Vance, he's been a little bit less coiffed, or however you would say it, like skilled on the campaign trail. He has said some radical stuff when he's out in front of those huge arenas of Trump voters who are spewing things back to him. He doesn't necessarily know how to relate to voters when he's buying donuts and bagels and going out there on the campaign trail. But this is a Yale-educated lawyer. He is somebody who knows how to debate. And, you know, Tim Walz has said that. He knew that this is not a skill that he does best. Tim Walz is the guy who is a retail politician. He does very well on the campaign trail. And he said, I'm not a master debater. I'm not someone like Kamala Harris who's a prosecutor. But I think he's doing great. Nobody is failing here. Both of them are doing a very decent job delivering their messages. Whether you agree with them or not, they're doing the job that they need to do.
I mean, I think Tim Walz had a really rough moment tonight when he was confronted with the reality that he had exaggerated or misspoke about whether he was present for Tiananmen Square. This was a scoop that CNN had, Andrew Kaczynski, K-File had earlier today about misstatements that he's made. if he's being honest, he could have just, and he kind of did just admit, I misspoke, but he flubbed it in such a way where it kind of became painfully long, the space they were giving to him to address it. It was kind of the one moment so far where the moderators really turned on Walz. Mostly they've been grilling JD Vance, and I think this backfires because at various points it looks like it's 3-on-1, and JD Vance is handling himself pretty well, frankly, better than Trump did when he also had the moderators against him. And the moderators at one point did try to do a very weaselly, well, just so we know, what experts say is this at the having the final word on it, and I think he was right to speak up and say, wait, you said you were not going to do that.
Well,
you said it was going to be the other candidate was going to do that.
They asked the question, do you believe climate change is a hoax? And he didn't answer it. And then they finalized that with, yes, the majority of scientists, over 99.9% of scientists believe that climate change is real.
But he didn't really say he disputes that.
Well, he didn't answer the
said
question.
that, right, he gave policy, so he didn't claim to dispute that climate change is real. He said that these are the policies I would like to pursue in order to have a more environmentally sound public policy, to have clean air, clean water, etc., that we want to do manufacturing in America. Now, I would like to hear more details about how we're going to actually make that happen. I happen to be someone who is very skeptical that we can return manufacturing jobs to the U.S., even with generous subsidies and generous policies because of the EPA, because of labor laws, etc. But JD Vance has a different vision for the Republican Party, one that is very pro-labor, one that is very pro-tariff and economic intervention. He actually said the one thing he likes about Biden's policies are the tariffs.
I mean, it's wild because he's literally campaigning against Donald Trump's policies.
Well, Donald Trump is for the tariffs. No, I mean, both sides agree we need more and more tariffs. I don't agree with this policy, but that's what they're saying they want.
Simultaneously, they want to, they're against NAFTA, but they're actually pro-NAFTA. I mean, the problem is with this party is the money that they're taking from big business is against the policies they're trying to win over the working class from. And of course, JD Vance is backed by, fully backed by Silicon Valley, libertarian, like yourself. I mean, you're not a Silicon Valley libertarian billionaire, but you're a libertarian.
I'm a libertarian. JD Vance is again pretty
Peter Thiel.
far from. Yeah, Peter Thiel does support him, but
to support the working labor.
Well, I don't know what he wants. I mean, Kamala Harris is supported by wealthy, influential business people too.
But not libertarian.
Soros,
Soros
there's massive amount of. Well, right, I know, but
they're not
saying
anti-labor
rich,
though. You can have some patriotic millionaires out there who understand they come from working class. I'm not saying that all the Democratic parties like that. Trust me.
I mean, I think both parties make rhetorical statements in favor of labor, but don't necessarily have policies that benefit labor. But as a libertarian, I think policies that benefit labor are sometimes not good for all of us as consumers. So it depends on particularly what we're talking about, because I don't think tariffs are, even if tariffs would narrowly benefit one sector of the economy, the number one complaint of Americans right now is that everything costs too much.
Yes.
And that is the burden that tariffs impose. But
in this conversation,
I'm glad to listen to it be adjudicated.
Listen, think back to 2016.
Yeah.
2016 was decided by the working class white voters, and 2020 definitely was.
Yeah.
They're having a very detailed conversation on the vice presidential level, which is unheard of, even 4 years ago. So it's a win for America that we're having these conversations, that they're delving into things more substantive than the presidential debate, which got into, the first one was about golfing. The last one was about eating cats and dogs, and that was pushed, of course, by JD Vance. So at least it's more substantive, and that's at least what the American people deserve. But again, are we actually moving the undecideds in this debate?
Well, no. I think the idea that this debate is going to matter very much is, I don't think anyone is really making that case. Although, I don't know, if you were let's say you're someone who was willing to vote for Trump, maybe, or voted for Trump previously but are not sold, and was turned off by the JD Vance pick, I think they're doing if you're watching this debate, I think they're doing everything conceivable to win you back as a potential voter for the Republican side. JD Vance, despite being very ardently pro-life and very much firmly committed on that issue, did everything he could there in what we just heard before we went to commercial break to reassure pro-choice Americans, women who are uncomfortable with his stance, that they're not an extremist, and that rather it is the Walz and the Democrats that are extremists on that, saying that he knew someone who struggled with making this choice, that we don't want anyone to die because of medical choices, that kind of thing. Up to you if you believe that or accept that answer, but I saw him really making a pitch to reassure those people. You can't deny that he was doing that.
Totally interesting, because in my book, they've lost that cause. They've lost the women who have already decided on choice. That's a done deal. Their game right now is to make sure that the Never Trumpers don't turn out for Kamala Harris. And that didn't seem like the game he was playing. I mean, JD Vance has had, his negatives are way above Tim Walz's. Now, they're both more or less within 1 point of favorability, but his negatives are so much higher. So his job was to be like the guy who could handle things, who could actually have a reasonable debate, the guy who's not 2025, the guy who's not saying crazy things on the stump speeches when he's out there, which he has done. The guy who's not wearing eyeliner, the guy who wasn't anti-Trump but now is
eyeliner. Is he wearing eyeliner?
Oh, he's wearing eyeliner. That's a whole thing.
What's wrong with that?
There's nothing wrong with it. It's just kind of against what he's standing for. But Tim Walz, on the other hand, I do feel like he could have pushed back harder on 2025. I think he could have pushed back harder on the flip-flopping and pushed back harder against attacks against himself. He's not a natural debater.
He can't fix his biggest liability, which is that he's not Josh Shapiro, in my view. All right, there's more debate to come. We will be watching it and we'll be reacting to it. When it's done, stay tuned a little bit later for the Hill's coverage of the rest of the vice presidential debate. We'll be back in a little bit. Good morning and welcome to Rising on this fateful day where Donald Trump has become the president. Niall, it is good to be with you as we prepare to parse these historic events.
It is good to be with you. I think we're probably both sleep deprived, as I imagine much of our audience is, whatever their ideological leanings, but we'll struggle through. Great to see you. What is on your radar, Robbie?
Well, let's talk about that. Donald Trump has once again won the presidency, and he has done so convincingly. In the coming days and weeks, commentators will spill considerable ink trying to make sense of this result. Mainstream media figures must grapple with the fact that a seemingly disgraced, twice impeached convicted felon, one frequently derided by them as a fascist and a racist, was defiantly reelected president. Moreover, he made major inroads with minority communities, vastly improved his totals in various states, is currently projected to win the popular vote. Now, make no mistake, this is a significant win for someone rendered not merely unelectable, but wholly evil by every elite media institution in existence. Pundits trying to understand how Trump could have possibly achieved this unthinkable comeback will focus on his message, his issues, and his campaign strategies. No doubt we'll be talking about that on the show as well. They'll investigate the aspects of Trump and Trumpism that makes him appealing to throngs of Americans that the mainstream media does not understand. But they might overlook the single most important contributing factor in Trump's victory. I'm not going to overlook it. I say this was not necessarily an affirmative vote for the candidate, but rather a negative endorsement of his opponent, Vice President Kamala Harris. Sorry to harsh her vibes, but it is unavoidable. Simply put, Harris was a disastrous candidate. No, that's tough to hear, but that's the truth. Now, admittedly, she had a tough job, given that she replaced the presumptive Democratic presidential nominee, President Joe Biden, in the literal 11th hour. But keep in mind that Biden was historically unpopular. He bottomed out at a 38% approval rating. That made him the least popular president in 70 years. Now, some of that disapproval was due to his advanced age and obvious cognitive decline. In that respect, Harris was certainly an improvement. But the fundamental mistake of the Harris campaign, the single biggest mistake, the one that assured Trump's reelection, in my view, no matter how improbable it seemed to elite tastemakers, was assuming that a mere candidate swap would be sufficient. This was egregiously wrong. Biden was not merely unpopular because he was too old to serve as president. He was unpopular because the American voters dislike his policies on the issues that mattered most to voters: the economy, inflation, immigration. Majorities of voters solidly preferred Trump over Biden. Well before the June debate performance that doomed the incumbent president's candidacy, by the way. Voters remembered the Trump economy fondly, blamed Biden's policies for ever-worsening inflation. Once Harris was installed as the candidate, She had the opportunity to engage in a reset. While she always faced the inherent difficulty of distancing herself from an administration which she served, she had every opportunity to throw Biden under the bus and part ways with his policies. She could have criticized his economic setbacks, his foreign policy, which was especially unpopular in the must-win state of Michigan, and his border program. Yet, 1 month ago, when she appeared on The View, the host asked Harris if there was anything she would have done differently from Joe Biden. Her answer? There's not a thing that comes to mind. Let's watch that.
If anything, would you have done something differently than President Biden during the past 4 years?
There is not a thing that comes to mind in terms of, and I've been a part of most of the decisions that have had impact.
That was an incredible mistake. In fact, that was the answer that lost her the presidency. The American people could not possibly have signaled any more strongly that they wanted a change, a fundamental break with the inflationary policies of the Biden administration. Harris did not run from these policies. She co-signed them. Indeed, there are several ways in which Harris, just going to say it, may have been a worse candidate overall than Biden. Now, it's true that Biden's rapidly declining mental state made him a likely loser in the 2024 election, but Biden, at least, he had a track record of winning previous elections. Harris's only foray into national presidential campaigns ended disastrously with her early exit from the 2019-2020 race. That was after she adopted a number of toxically unpopular progressive stances, many of which she was forced to shed over the course of the last 4 months. This rendered her a decidedly weak candidate. Again, say what you will about Biden, but he had the good sense not to alienate Pennsylvania voters by endorsing a fracking ban. Harris never ran away from Biden's record or pretended she represented some actual sea change in policy. Her pitch was Biden's second term, overseen by a younger and more capable person. This pitch did not merely come up short, it vastly underperformed expectations. That's because voters wanted to part ways with both Biden and his inflationary policies. Now, whether Trump can deliver on his promises and restore the country's future certainly remains to be seen. But one thing is for certain. The decision to suddenly and dramatically install Kamala Harris as the Democratic nominee without any change whatsoever to the Democratic Party's underlying policy agenda will be seen in retrospect as a foolish mistake. Americans don't want Biden. They don't want Bidenism either. Kamala Harris was more of the exact same.
So, listen, a lot of thoughts there, Robbie. I will get to the meat of your argument.
I just got it out there.
You got it out there. You put it all out there on this historic morning. I think, you know, before I really engage with the was Kamala a terrible candidate, I think sitting in this seat, I should say why I think a lot of Americans are pretty distressed this morning. And I think that is primarily because a person who, as you noted at the start of your radar, twice impeached, charged in 4 criminal cases, convicted in one of those cases, and perhaps most egregiously, someone who sparked and incited an attempt to overturn the last election in 2020, has been re-elected. And he's been re-elected, it seems, with a majority of the popular vote. And those events in 2020 are events that he has never apologized for his role in. And so to the majority of people who voted for him, that simply doesn't seem to matter. And I think for the people who voted against him, that's a pretty disturbing thing to have to grapple with. Now, on the point of Kamala Harris, I don't think she is a particularly fantastic candidate. I thought at the start of her run she seemed kind of okay-ish, and then it sort of took a dip back to the Kamala Harris I remember from her 2020 campaign, who was rather underwhelming. I guess the question I have about the points that you made in the radar is, like, it seems like the logical extension of that argument is she just wouldn't be a Democrat, right? That she would be so far to the center in your mind that she wouldn't, in fact, back really any Democratic priorities. And that would seem likely to lose and de-energize a lot of voters to me.
Well, we'll get into it on the rest of the show. There are ways in which I think she could have, I think on Gaza and Israel, she should have leaned more to the left. I think that killed her in Michigan. We're going to talk about that more in the show. But there is evidence, and I'll admit, I was skeptical that effect was really going to matter very much. But no. You do see in Muslim Arab areas of Michigan, her getting absolutely slaughtered there because of her connection to Biden on that issue. So on that, she could have been more progressive. On Some economic issues that I don't agree with end up being more popular than others, but I think she needed to break with Biden on immigration and the causes of inflation. And also, I'll bring it up. I understand why they swapped Biden out for her, because Biden really demonstrated himself not capable of campaigning, running the country, let alone campaigning. But this is someone who no one voted for her, did not fare well, was not tested by a primary process. And I know I've been saying that for forever. And I'm not saying they could pick their candidate however they want, but the way they picked their candidate, they arrived at someone who the voters have rejected somewhat decisively. I won't say this is the biggest blowout election ever, but it's going to lose the popular vote. Right. This seems like they did screw this up, in fact. Right. Now, they were in a difficult position by the time Biden was getting out, but I don't know. Maybe they should have done an open primary. Better yet, Biden should have just not run for re-election, and they should have had her up against Josh Shapiro and Gavin Newsom and Buttigieg and whoever else, and then we would have seen, given the shape that they were in, maybe that's all they can do, but it did not pan out.
I mean, she does appear to have fared the worst of any of the three candidates, Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, and herself, against Donald Trump. And, nobody in the Democratic Party can be happy about that. I think they were placed in an almost impossible bind, frankly, by virtue of Biden deciding to seek a second term in the first place. Then there was the catastrophic debate. It was seemingly clear, I think, that Biden was going to get annihilated if he remained the nominee. Now, then you get into a more complicated argument, it seems to me. Could you have looked past Kamala Harris and had an open primary? Could it have been, a Gretchen Whitmer, for example, or a Josh Shapiro? And I'm not really saying that this is right or wrong. I just think as a matter of realpolitik, you could not oust the sitting black female vice president in the Democratic Party as it is comprised right now.
I hear all that, but a lot of people got to be looking at the numbers and saying, man, she did worse with minorities than he did. She did worse with all categories. They had on the ticket the only guy who's beaten Trump, and they put him aside for someone else, and she lost catastrophically. I understand why, because his polling looked bad, but it was not a gamble that paid off at all. It was a gamble that failed miserably.
It was a gamble that failed, but I would say the Joe Biden even of 2020 was significantly different. Not vastly, not chalk and cheese, but significantly different from the Joe Biden on that debate stage in June 2024. And frankly, the Joe Biden who hampered Kamala Harris's chances a bit more in the closing stretch of this campaign with the garbage comment, with the lock him up, I sort of meant lock him up politically comment. None of those things were helpful. I do think Biden would plainly have fared worse. It's just who else could you have got other than Harris?
Well, we've got a lot more coming up on Rising today. Amber Duke will be joining us to give us her take. We're going to be breaking down the numbers in various states. We're going to be looking especially at Michigan and how the Arab American vote impacted Kamala Harris. We're going to be looking at the Latino vote, which is Trump has made tremendous gains with that. So much to discuss. Please stay with us. Thanks for watching.